No, the title and thumbnail are not clickbait. I actually had the opportunity to meet with the co-founder and CEO of Mino Games, Sasha Mackinnon, and talk about the circumstances behind Mino Monsters' shutdown. And yes, it is pronounced Mino Monsters, something I caught wind of after my first video and was later confirmed by Sasha himself. So, I'm already dropping insane knowledge bombs because I'm not sure how many people have actually been saying it correctly. I've been saying Mino Monsters for over a decade now, and that's just how I thought it was said. Anyways, I don't want to go too off topic, so I'll leave that there. A few weeks ago, I received a few comments in my first Mino Monsters video from people on Mino Games support team trying to set up a meeting with me and Sasha. I was a bit skeptical at first, but we took our conversations to private messages and it turned out to be legit. I was both really excited and a little nervous about it. Excited because this was an amazing opportunity where I could serve as a platform to clear the air on the sort of mystery behind Mino Monsters' shutdown. And nervous because I was going to talk to the CEO of a multi-million-dollar game studio, and you know, I'm just a college kid on YouTube. But in preparation for the meeting, I made a community post on the channel asking you guys what you wanted to hear addressed. Thank you for the support on that post, by the way. And there were a few obvious things everyone wanted to see clarified, but I just wanted to represent the community as best as I could have. The meeting lasted a little over half an hour, so I couldn't cover everything, but I think I got the scoop on most major questions. I don't mean to delay this any further, so I will now get into what I learned from this meeting. But first, I want to thank you guys for the support on the last Mino Monsters video. It was absolutely insane. It was so cool to see a bit of a resurgence of people talking about the game. And I just really appreciate the support that video got, so thank you. Alright, let's get into it, starting with what I'm sure is everybody's first question. So there was never a clear reason as to why the game shut down. From what I could gather during my research on the previous video, it was either a game-breaking bug that they just couldn't work their way around, or it was that the servers were too costly. And so it turns out that the game-breaking bug thing was not true. That's not what killed the game. The servers being too costly were part of the problem, but not the whole picture. So as I presented in my last video, Mino Monsters 2 was launched in late 2015, saw a great deal of success in the following months, and was later shut down in 2016 going into 2017, seemingly out of nowhere. So there is actually one pretty major development in mobile gaming that happened in 2016, one that you can argue changed the entire landscape of the mobile gaming space for a while, and still does, and that was, drumroll please, Pokemon Go. I hadn't really thought about it prior to hearing it, but yeah, it kind of makes sense. You now have an actual Pokemon game on mobile that is just dominating the space and didn't leave much room for competition, but there's a bit more nuance to the situation. So when Pokemon Go first released and was making these big waves, Mino Monsters 2 actually got a lot more attention. Sasha mentioned their revenues pretty much doubled. Mino Monsters 2 was the second most popular result when searching for Pokemon in the App Store. It was just an all-around good time for Mino Games, but it was brief. What happened was after Pokemon Go came out, Mino Monsters advertising was put to a halt. Yes, they were enjoying all this organic influx of people downloading and playing Mino Monsters based on nostalgia for Pokemon, but there weren't really any opportunities to still advertise the game. Pokemon Go was just too dominant. Mino Monsters 2 only saw that huge wave of success that doubled their revenue, not because of their current advertising, but because it was a Pokemon adjacent game that was around when Pokemon Go hit the ground running. But that wave eventually settled, and their revenues dwindled down after that, and it got to a point where the servers ended up being too costly and it didn't make sense to spend thousands on advertising. So they had to make the tough call and shut down the game. And since it was a free-to-play game, you don't make your money back overnight. Advertising is really important, but that costs a lot. Add the server costs on top of that. You need a constant flow of people downloading, playing, and spending money on your game to justify maintaining it and updating it. It can potentially take months or even years to see that money come back to you. And unfortunately for Mino Monsters 2, After their wave of success died down, the ends didn't justify the means and they shut it down. You're in a situation where you can no longer advertise because of Pokemon Go. You gained a lot of new players and made a lot of money, but you've already peaked. You're now beginning to plateau and move on to a decline. There was no room left for growth, and those new players and all that money coming in gradually disappeared. It was certainly a tough decision for Mino Games to make at that time. Mino Monsters 2 was their baby, but they did what they thought was going to be best for the game, which meant pulling the plug. So now you guys know how and why it shut down, but the question you might be asking yourself now is, so in 2016, Mino Games underwent many changes. One major change was that they had moved their operations to Montreal. They had rebranded themselves from Mino Monsters to Mino Games. They moved their entire operation to Montreal, and their already small team of around 10 people was cut down to 5 at the end of it. So in many ways, they were starting from scratch. Now, Sasha also attributed the lack of communication at the time to just a general lack of PR. The more time passed, the less it made sense to issue a statement about Mino Monsters shutdown. They were moving on to other projects, and it was just a new beginning for the company. He does regret how the communication, or lack thereof at the time, was handled, and he would go back and change things if he could. As far as I understand, there should be some blog post online either coming out soon or already out now from Mino Games that will go over what I'm telling you now, so look out for that if you wanted some additional insight into this situation. You guys now know the circumstances behind the game shutdown and why there was not clear communication regarding it at the time. So now you might be wondering what could have been. So if you guys watched my previous Mino Monsters video, you knew that there were plans to turn Mino Monsters into this grand multimedia franchise that spans games, television, merchandise, all that fun stuff. And as you can likely figure out, that didn't happen. Like we now know, Pokemon Go basically buried the game. But what if that wasn't the case? What if Pokemon Go never came out? So I asked Sasha what plans he had for Mino Monsters 2 had they kept developing it, and on top of the aforementioned multimedia franchise deal, he said that there were 2 major updates planned for the game itself. The first one would have seen guilds added to the game. You could join and create these factions with your friends, compete with one another in battle, possibly earn cool and exclusive rewards, all the things that make guilds fun. The second planned update piqued my curiosity even more, and it involved the endgame of Mino Monsters 2, and it would have played like a roguelike game. An example that was brought up in the conversation was Slay the Spire. If you haven't played Slay the Spire, I'll briefly break down the gameplay for you. You have this starting character, you have this preset build that you expand greatly upon as you traverse through the multiple levels of the game. It gets to a point where there are dozens and dozens of possibilities in the game, from abilities, loot, enemy and boss encounters, all of it. This is a type of game where repeated attempts are encouraged. You wouldn't really beat the game in a single attempt. You would get as far as you could, die, and then you have new knowledge and even new things unlocked in the game to help you progress even further. It makes for this really rewarding and really rich gameplay loop that never looks the exact same. That's pretty much what we would have gotten in Mino Monsters 2 if it was still up and running. There would be a new level in the game called something along the lines of Ragnareth's Dungeon that you can enter with a team of monsters, go deeper and deeper with the combat encounters, ramping up in difficulty. You could earn cool rewards and resources, and you just go until you won or were defeated. This would have been really cool to have in the game. Something with a lot of replayability like the guilds would have had as well. Unfortunately, those ideas never saw the light of day. But is it possible to still see the game come back online and have these updates come to the game? And before I get into this topic, let me just preface this by saying I'm not a programmer. A lot of the technical terms and concepts I don't have a good grasp on, and this topic revolves around those things. I'm going off what Sasha had explained to me and whatever additional information I could find online. So in theory, yes, the old Mino Monsters servers can be rebooted, but there are many hoops and hurdles to overcome that essentially diminishes any likelihood of that happening. The reality of the situation is that Mino Monsters was made using tools that aren't really viable or supported today. Mobile gaming was in its early days when Mino Monsters was being developed, and there weren't really any tried and true programming tools or languages that everyone was using. The Mino team ended up using a programming language known as HAX under a framework known as OpenFL. which you can actually see advertising Mino Monsters as one of the games built from them online on their website. What ended up happening since Mino Monsters shut down was that OpenFL was no longer supported in later iOS updates. So if Mino Games were to even try to bring back Mino Monsters 1 or 2 on modern iOS, they would have to completely change frameworks, reboot the servers, recompile the code, and update all the libraries. According to Sasha, if they had used Unity when they were making Mino Monsters, they would be in a better position to bring back the game now, as Unity is a more relevant and supported game making engine. But as you now know, it didn't end up being that way. It would just end up as this whole process that doesn't make sense to go through. It would make more sense to just build a new game. So, will they? So, short answer, no. There aren't any current plans to revisit the Mino Monsters IP at the moment. Mino Games' full focus is on their upcoming game Dimensionals, which we will talk about in a minute. Although there doesn't seem to be any concrete plans to make a new Mino Monsters game, Sasha would like to revisit the property someday. He'd likely not make it a free-to-play game with microtransactions, but rather a premium paid experience with no microtransactions that will be on PC and console with cross-play compatibility, which is what Dimensionals will be. And the likelihood of us seeing a new Mino Monsters game in the format I just described to you might hinge on the success of Dimensionals. That's just my own thought at least. But let's talk about Dimensionals now, because there's some pretty interesting things to discuss here. So Dimensionals will be this premium RPG roguelike game that you can soon get on Steam that will feature no Web3 integration, which is an intriguing revelation since my first Mino Monsters video. The whole crypto and Web3 thing that the game was planned to have is no longer being advertised, and will no longer be a part of the game, at least for the time being. Web3 gaming is still a shaky ground, and the last thing Mino Games wants to do is polarize players, so they are foregoing that aspect of the game. They might do some light crypto integration down the line if it makes sense, but they're not banking on that, and that's not something that they're concerned about right now. I think they made a great call not going through with the Web3 integration, as it is not many gamers' cup of tea, myself included. They really want those who enjoyed Mino Monsters to see this game as Mino Monsters' sort of spiritual successor, which it kind of is. The gameplay seems to have overlaps with Mino Monsters, both being inspired by Pokemon, but Dimensional's gameplay has more nuances and possibilities to it. Sasha described it as having Slay the Spire's potential for insane and satisfying combos, while also having the accessibility and simplicity of Pokemon or Final Fantasy, all of it being visualized with the flashy, colorful, and charming art style and character design that Mino Games excels at. The game can be wishlisted on Steam now, and you can go sign up for an upcoming playtest. I'll leave its Steam page in the description if you're interested. There are also plans to bring Dimensionals to consoles as well, but for now it's just on Steam. If you enjoyed Mino Monsters in the past and were initially turned off by Dimensionals being a Web3 game, I do suggest at least checking out Dimensionals. The Web3 stuff is no longer there, and the game honestly looks fun. There's new gameplay you can check out, as well as blog posts and new assets you can view on their website, which will also be in the description. But that's pretty much the scoop I got from the meeting with Sasha. He's a really cool guy, and you can tell that he loves what he does. A huge thank you to Sasha and those at Mino Games who put this meeting together. I feel so honored that you guys not only watched my Mino Monsters video, but reached out to me and trusted me to relay new information to the Mino Monsters community. So shout out to Mino Games, thank you all. And thank you guys, the viewers, for the insane support on my first Mino Monsters video. It was so cool to see you guys share your experiences with Mino Monsters and come together not only in the comment section of the video, but also at Mino Source and the change.org petition to bring back the game. I do hope we get a new Mino Monsters game down the line, and if Dimensionals is any indicator of what that could look like, I think it could be an amazing game. Also, sorry for literally 0 uploads last month. I got pretty busy with both work and school, but I still am busy with both work and school, but this video has been delayed long enough. I just want to get it out there for you guys. I hope I can get on a more reasonable upload schedule after this. No promises though. But with that, I'm gonna leave this one here. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, it does help a lot, and do subscribe if you want to see more videos on games that I love. Please be sure to share your thoughts with me in the comments. I'd love to read what you guys have to say. Share this video around if you know anyone who's played Mino Monsters before. But yeah, that's it for me today, guys. Thank you for tuning in.